Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. Today, you are listening to Creative Thinking. You're in the right place for conversations about current problems and needs that we as business leaders face. And you're going to hear a discussion today about what it means to build personal tenacity around being creative and around thinking. And in fact, it's going to go into more than that. It's the concept of what we think about and what's important to think about and making the space for the thinking to occur. Colleen Miller creates a safe and laughter-filled environment where people discover who they are here to be, to learn from their past, and to see themselves as the remarkable beings that they really are, both personally and professionally. You will get to meet her right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
We're going to be talking about creative thinking today. And when we think about creative thinking and we think about all of the wonderful things that go with creative thinking, we also have to think that we're supposed to be creative first. I want to know from you, Colleen, are people required to be creative to be able to think creatively?
I don't know that they have to think of themselves as creative. I think they have to be willing to open the possibility of being creative.
How do you open the possibility?
You get willing.
How do you get willing?
You have an overriding need, or a coach who says this might help your life, or someone who says this might help your life, you're sort of stuck.
So some sort of pain, that means the only way forward really is to change.
Yeah, pain plus some other person who's experienced an opening of their creativity to guide you, like a teacher, coach, a mentor.
Well, so let's talk about this pain point, right? When we're talking to sales and marketing and we're talking all of these different things that we talk about in business, one of the things is, what's the pain point? What's the pain point? Are we in enough pain to make a change? What do our customers think is painful so that we can make it easy for them? And I find that a whole bunch of hooey-boo-looey. And the reason I find it hooey-boo-looey is because, of course, somebody's going to have this pain point. And to be able to talk to the pain point, we have to know what it is. But can we really talk to a pain point if we have not experienced it directly ourselves?
I feel like I can identify pain in people because I've coached enough people and worked with enough people that I can see that they may not identify it as pain, but they may identify it as a stuckness, confusion, depression, low energy. They start to get very tired. They start to get very not only depressed, but despondent and feeling hopeless. And my belief is that when you're in a place of hopeless, that's when you desperately need intervention, because hopelessness is the worst thing I think we can feel, because there are no options when we're at hopeless. The minute we get to some place where someone can infuse a little hope that there's a way out of this, that there's some way out, that I can help you find your roadmap out, that you keep stumbling over the same things. Somebody else, I think some people can find their way out alone. I'm not sure we all can. So it's terribly important that we talk about it. And the unfortunate part of being in that level of despondency and stuckness and hopelessness is that we don't talk. We tend to not talk to other people.
I find it interesting how you describe that. And I know this is a very personal journey. And so where I think this conversation is going to head is going to be in personal creative thinking, not necessarily team creative thinking. When we haven't taken the time to figure out how to break into our own creativity, break into our own willing and our own possibility, it's really hard to lead other people into that same space. And so starting right here and getting really good at it is what will make ourselves be able to model that for others and then to work in a group setting. And so we talked a little bit about pain and we talked a little bit about that thing. Let's talk about thinking. So how do you define thinking, Colleen?
I don't think we think. I think we are a thought.
Okay, say that again.
I don't think we think. I think we are thought.
Now tell me more about that. Put some more words around it. Give us some context.
I don't know that we're the creators of our thoughts. I think that we may be the recipients of thoughts that are out in the universe. I believe we're all part of a huge weaving fabric of all that is. That's my belief.
You know, there's this phenomenon, and this goes on, I think, for everybody. We've all had great ideas, and then they become fads. Or we all have the things that are our favorites, and they become fads. We have these inventions that we want to make because our life will be better, and then before we know it, it's the as seen on TV. So there is a common thought, and our own thoughts. And I'm gonna take a slightly different position. I'm gonna say we have common thoughts, and our thoughts, even though they're thoughts and people don't actually get in our heads, there's still an element of it, of this common connection that we have as humanity. And so my thought is my thought. Your thought is your thought. Yet both of us could be thinking the same thing completely independently.
Right. We can have a different interpretation. We can have it. I think what's different is what we make it mean. We can have the same information float in, and we can attach different meaning to it, and we can head in different directions with it, and we can do different things with that information. So maybe we'll use the word information. So I think that the information is out there, and we attach to it or not, and we're the ones who give it our own individual meaning. So that comes from the outside, and then I think that what meaning we give it, very much depends upon our background. So nature, nurture, and I believe that there are a lot of elements feeding into that. I think that we have a lot of different sources for the way that we interpret information. Our families, our friends, our current influences, past influences. And so it's a lot to weed through. And so what we generally do is we respond to the information in the same way. And like Einstein said, can't solve any problems with the same thinking that created them.
Right.
So if you're going to be a creative problem solver, you've got to get willing to think differently and not just apply your old solutions and your old conclusions to the information, or you're going to end up right where you began.
How do we think? What does that process look like?
I think information floats in. We attach meaning to it. We make it mean things about the world. We make it mean things about ourselves, and we make it mean things about, we conclude how it's going to turn out. That's normal process.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm talking about is if you're going to have new results, you've got to interrupt that process somewhere.
Oh, okay. Because I would say not interrupt, but get more information at different points.
Well, you got to change. I think of these things in terms of links on a chain.
Mm-hmm.
You have information, you link something to it, then you link another thought to it, you link another thought to it, and oftentimes you're down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So if you are fed up with being down the rabbit hole, the solution to that is, wait a minute, what thought could I think that would interrupt this linkage of these chains of thoughts that's going to take me somewhere else? So I think you have to get really sick of going down that proverbial rabbit hole. And when you do, that's when you need to, then you begin to start to search out new information, new sources, and you got to get willing to get out of your own way. Meaning you can't continue to conclude that you know exactly how this is going to turn out, because, you know, form follows thought. You'll create the same thing again.
It's interesting because what you were just describing, at least that piece where where you want to link something different in some place, that equates to I have 3 levels of awareness, to that 3rd level of awareness. And I feel like it's the awareness level that we all aspire to. Holy cow, we're at this place where I can do what I've always done. I can do something else. And in that moment, in that place, I don't know about you, but I can only do that like 20% of the time for the patterns that I have already found, that I have decided to be aware of because I'd like to have some sort of change. And so, you know, I'm an aspiring level 3 awareness creator, if you will. And I'm thinking about what you're talking about, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You have to get really sick of it. And you have to know that when you're in it, right? So there's this concept of, I always think about it like a tantrum. You don't know you've got this big emotion until you're done and you're like, whoa, I just had a big emotion. And then there's somewhere in the middle. I found myself too. I've got this big emotion or this thing that is really charged, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm on the ride. I don't even remember standing in line, but here I am, and there's nothing I can do because I'm in the middle of it. And you get to see yourself ride it out. And then it's that once you're in the middle of it and going, oh, I can see that I'm in it, then it gives us more that indication of, is it that point? And what is that point that we are able to change?
What you're talking about is patterned responses to situations. So the antidote to those patterned responses, I think, is to start training yourself before you have to make a decision, and before you start to link thoughts down the rabbit hole to a certain question, a certain challenge, a certain problem that's in your life, is you start to get very, very careful about your thoughts, and you start to question everything that you think. Byron Katie is a wonderful teacher on this. She says she goes around the world asking questions, questioning everything, and meaning that she needs to question everything that she thinks, everything that she needs to prove is true, because what we do is we create conclusions, and then we believe they're true, and then we have to continue to do the same things over and over to prove ourselves right. So we have to be willing to be incorrect about our conclusions in order to have different thinking. So the way to do that is to practice questioning everything. So you say to yourself, her questions are, is that true? Can I absolutely know that's true? Who am I when I believe that's true? And who would I be if I did not have that thought? When you start subjecting all of your thoughts to that level of scrutiny, your percentage will rise, and you will become more aware of the conclusions you've drawn, what comes to us eventually is that it's all made up.
Right. But before we go there, I don't even want to get to the point that it's made up. I'm tired.
Right. I'm tired, but the freedom place is understanding that everything you think is absolute truth is made up by you or someone else. It's all made up. And so if what you've made up and what you've been sold and what you believe isn't serving you, that's the purpose of those questions, isn't serving you, is to make up something that will. You had the great and brilliant power to make up all of that, all of these stories. We live within stories. And if you've made up those stories, you have the power to make up other stories. So make up something that serves you.
Love
Make
it.
up something that works toward, that helps you move toward that place you want to go. And there's another lovely question. Is this action, is this thought taking me toward or away from where I want to go? If it's taking you away, you must interrupt that thought and think something different.
I hear you.
You have the power to do that. Our minds have the power to alter the behavior of subatomic atomic particles anywhere, I would submit, in the universe. So you're pretty powerful. Make up.
As are you. I'm still tired. No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually not tired. However, you have seen me, Colleen. You have seen me at some of my more low points. The length of time we've known each other has not been too long, but it's been long enough. You've seen some of that. And I'm thinking about this and I'm like, okay, so I'm at a stage in my life where the business is growing, where there's community involvement that is really important to me and I make space for, and it disrupts other things in my life because I care about it so much, where I want to be the best mother I can be. I want to be the best wife that I can be. And I want to be the best me that I can be. And sometimes in that order, but most of the time in a different order. And it's really interesting because you're talking about questioning and everything all the time. And I'm like, could I just pick one?
Oh yeah, you don't have to do it all at once.
Can I start small?
I would suggest you do the things that, what I find is the things that are most relevant to look at are the things that plague you in every area of your life. I think it's interesting when I have clients who say, oh, I just want to work on my business. I don't want to work on personal stuff. I'm like, who goes to your business? Who shows up at your business? Wherever you are, you're there. So
and there's another piece of that.
Consider the universal of that.
Well, and if there's a problem at business, that means there is a respective problem at home. It might be in a different quadrant or it might be in a different area. But if there was a fight the night before and it was pretty insane, or you got a truth bomb dropped on you and you're totally floored, taken out of context of everything the stories you've been telling yourself, now you have to go to work. All of a sudden, there are going to be all kinds of problems at work for no other reason than that energy is just kind of carrying through. And if it's long lasting, if sales have plateaued or in your position, you seem to be getting passed over all the time for some sort of a promotion, there's a closer look to be taken. Or we're in charge of budget, and our budget every year that we're asking for more for growth, we actually get less. What is the reason? What is our part in getting less? Are we not using it effectively? Are we not getting the results? What are those things? And they are directly related to the skills that we are using in every part of our life.
Well, and our limiting beliefs, our personal stuff, how we're showing up, and all of that is getting in our way. So I look upon people as kind of like the decks of aircraft carriers.
Okay.
The more you clear off that deck, the more new planes you can land, the more new information you can absorb. So the more you identify as a team member or as that employee who's trying to make a difference and make things show up differently, create different results, how much of your junk are you bringing to the show every day, and how much can you clear? You do your personal work, you're not plopping all of that junk in the middle of your problem-solving activities, your problem-solving brainstorming. You're not bringing all of that crap to the table. And that's your personal responsibility. I believe we all have personal responsibility to clear our decks. That is the place then where you can receive new information. You can't download new data onto your hard drive if you haven't cleared it.
Have you heard of the 100th monkey phenomenon?
Yes.
Effect? Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, it's that what you were speaking about before, which is I have an idea in Indonesia, someone else has the same idea. This happened with flight. This happened with automobiles. This happens with all of the brilliant ideas. One person, simultaneously people are thinking about the same thing, and it's as if they've copied each other because it all shows up really in very close time. I believe that's because someone has tweaked the fabric of the collective consciousness, has had a unique, perhaps, mutated thought, and then it goes into the collective. So you were talking about group consciousness. That's what I call the collective.
Yeah.
So it's all out there and it's all available. And it's also all always available to all of us all the time, because we are a part, in my belief, of a very large infinite whole. So if we raise our vibrations sufficiently and get curious and interested in higher levels of awareness, we're up there hanging out with the vibrations of that genius level that has those kinds of thoughts. I prefer to do that than be in the kind of the mucky soup of everyday inconsequential thoughts and
Well, there's a word for that too. I mean, the analogies that I've heard range from you put a whole bunch of crabs in a pot, you don't have to put a lid on it because the crabs won't let each other escape, right? They'll keep pulling each other down. They're in the workplace. Have you ever heard that?
Well, it's very sad to me, and it's very bad. It's probably true, but my question is, what if you injected a creative crab into that mix? You'd have crabs coming out all the time, all over the place.
Well, and but I guess that's where I'm looking. I'm looking at the flip side of what you were just talking about, and it's this concept to this analogy of the crabs. A technical business term, and I say technical, it's really just a new buzzword called groupthink, where being part of, it's a different way to talk about belonging. When we belong, we feel safe. And the desire for harmony within the group is so strong that certain creative different behaviors are discarded and in fact suppressed and discouraged. And so it's both sides, right? That 100th monkey or this groupthink stuff. We have enough people who believe a certain way, we can carry the weight of it. And is it acceptable? And what is mediocre to one person and what is excelling to that same person is going to be very different to the next, to the next, to the next. And so it's almost like we've got this idea of this potential, this I'm going to call it a team poison, this concept of groupthink, where if we are starting to work in a vacuum and we have no extra data, no extra information, we're only validating what we believe, we're only coming from the perspective that we have decided is important for this group, that's the quickest way to declining sales, losing market share, getting left behind in emerging technology and not seeing changes of what customers want. All of those things become obvious. And when we're facing problems, it's not always because of groupthink. And when we're facing problems, it's not always because we're too creative. It's usually somewhere in the middle, huh?
I think what you're speaking of is at a primordial level in our primitive brain, we are group beings. We are group. We must, in order to survive, because we weren't really excellent before we had tools, etc. We weren't excellent as predators, and we had to get quite skilled at that before we were capable on our own. So we clung together in the caves, and so that's part of our primitive brain thinking, is that we must be a part of our group or we will die. That's primitive brain thought, and they've done a lot of studies on that. And so it's an extremely powerful motivator that we must not be rejected by the group. So if you come up with a new thought, it probably is going to, the risk is that it'll be stupid or seem stupid because it's new. And think of all of the inventions and all of the creations and all of the things that people have accomplished, and everyone around them made fun of them. So the fear of rejection. And in this case, if you think outside the box, in my opinion, in current corporate America, you could very easily lose your job because you're a rebel, you're not a team player. And so there is huge risk to thinking creatively. And the way I see of coming out of that is to value that individual thought is one of the greatest assets that an organization might have if they channel it well. And that everybody has an idea, everybody gets to play rule can overwhelm things and muck up the water. It can. I'm clear that that's true. But in an organized setting where you're encouraging creative thought in ways that feel safe for people, and you thank them for their ideas regardless of whether they're stupid or not, or they can be fleshed out or not, or they need more work or not, you're creating a far more effective environment, because what you're doing is utilizing one of the most powerful assets you have, which is your employees' creativity and their imagination. Because the only way to compete in a competitive world is to have a better idea than the other guys. The only way, or women, the only way to do that is to let people think and let people imagine and let people, I call it canoodling. You can't find a solution until you kick it around a bit. There has to be a cessation of kicking it around, because otherwise you just end up with tired people who are mucking around in the mud. And you and I have had experiences of that. But with some infusion of energy and some controls, you can create think tank kind of thinking, and you can alter the way that goes. That group mentality will take you down the rabbit hole, riffing up, what could we think of from here? What can we create from here? What's another way to look at this? What's this? Let's do that. If people were rewarded for those kind of questions, you'd have a different environment, and you'd have competitive thinking, and you'd have new ideas. Have you noticed how many movies are remakes of old movies? How many ads are remakes of old ads? I'm like 100 years old, and I remember some of this stuff from when TV was young. And now they're just repeating this stuff and regurgitating it. I'm worried that there's a cessation, a death of creativity in these people, or I don't know that you can kill it, but I think you can certainly suppress it.
Well, I think it's a variation of groupthink on a mass scale. And I'm thinking about what you were just sharing, and I find it interesting because companies have to do more with less, right? Mine included. We have to do more with less. Every person on my team is wearing more than one hat at all times. And sometimes they're wearing 3 or 4 hats at the same time instead of just one at a time that they're just rotating through like accessories. And when we're faced with that, and we're faced with the need to react fast, I'm going to quote Draft Day now. Actually, I'm not even going to quote Draft Day. I'm just going to reference it because I was just watching this movie this weekend, rewatching it. I love Draft Day. One of the things that the head coach, that's the main character, was saying was the best players learn how to slow down when the pressure is the highest. And it occurred to me, I'm like, holy cow, Colleen, that's what I teach people how to do. That's what Red Directions trainings are all about, right? And then I'm thinking, it's a skill that we can all learn. Not very many people understand it because it's easy to get swept up and fight the fire that is necessary, and it's righteous and it's needed to fight those fires. And it feels so good that we want to stay in that place with that energy, with that adrenaline, and we forget to slow down. And it's in that concept of slowing down that there's this space that's created. And I'm not saying this is like rearing children, because taking the time to rear children to be creative thinkers and not have a squashed soul and not have squashed creativity, that's like, I wish I had like a whole community just dedicated to my one child for that. In the workplace, we could do the same thing, yet we're past that rearing stage. We're coming together with our own traits, with our own beliefs. And it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to be able to mix all of these different things together into this mush of what is safe, what is not. And you said, talk about it. Where did I write that down? To talk about it. And I want to take that pin out and I want to come back to it here, because sometimes it's not necessarily about a process or making time or allowing this or allowing that and figuring out how to do more in the already squished precious time we have. It's to talk about what's going on and to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it.
Place, making it safe to talk about it. I have an example that I think it's real simple. When you speak of that slowing down, what are you going to include? What are you going to be thinking about while you're slowing down? If you direct your thoughts positively, I think what you're going to be thinking about is, how do I do it better? How do I make this work? One of the problems in the creative process is, my painting teacher said, there is a point at which every painting is ugly, really ugly. And you must nurture yourself and your painting through its ugly growing pains. And my grandson is 10 and I am a sculptor, and he wanted to make an eagle and we didn't have a lot of time. And he had this grandiose idea of an eagle holding on to a soccer ball. He's a boy. I'm sorry, that's just a sexist remark, but he is. He loves soccer, he's crazy nuts. So it had to be an eagle and it had to hold on to a soccer ball. And this, so sculpturally, this is clay. It's going to fall apart if it isn't properly balanced. So I helped him create the idea of a tail and the two talons and the soccer ball. And we did all this, and he cut out all the pieces, he put it all together, and it was all wet, and we had to go because he had to get home to play soccer. So this whole thing is like falling apart, and this kid's face is starting to fall. And I said, stop, we're going to slow down. He stayed with me. We propped it. I said, okay, here's what we do now. Here's what we need to do. Here's what we need to do. I had the knowledge to walk him through it. He had the patience and the commitment to his idea to stay with it, because that thing could have turned into a ball of mush on the table at any time in about 10 or 15 minutes. There was a 10 or 15 minute crisis. I was so proud of him that he listened, he carefully did what I asked, and that we worked together to create that. We had something creative that fit his vision, that he saw through to the end. We saw it through its ugly growing pains, and we did that. People who do that, who get willing to work the idea and stay with it. Einstein said, I'm not smarter than other people, I just stay with ideas longer. You stay with it and you don't give up. So those athletes who slow down, they're also in the game. They're saying, how do I do this and not quit? It would have been so easy at so many points in that period to just lump that clay back together and say to hell with it. And neither do I. We're willing.
It's true. And so taking this, another addition to this perspective is that I'm thinking about meditation. There's so many different ways to do meditation. And some of us feel like we're good at it, and some of us feel like we're really not good at it. The thing is, when any of us start, even if it was for a whopping 3 minutes, right, which is a big deal. I remember when I first started meditating, 3 minutes was like winning a marathon or just finishing a marathon. The whole time, for that whole 3 minutes that I could sit still and somewhat clear my mind, I would get really frustrated about halfway through, my whole 90 seconds in, because all this stuff started to show up. And what shows up? The stuff that shows up when we make the time and have space, is all the stuff that's bothering us, which I find fascinating because we're already working on things in our subconscious. We're already trying to figure stuff out. And so taking time, and I'm not saying meditate to find your problems, I'm saying taking time, creating a calendar item, provided you need to do that, a quiet time sometime during the day that you can just disappear, even for 5 minutes, to just see what comes up. What comes up. And then I'm also a big proponent of saying, okay, I'm going to just take note of that. I don't have to do anything about it right now. Nothing's happening anyway. It's just working in my subconscious. Now it's in my conscious because I made time to see it, hear it, feel it, experience it, whatever that is coming up for me. And then notice it and stick it someplace. You may never look at it again. That's okay. That is okay. It's been noticed. The point is, though, now when we sit down and we have think time for our personal development, think time for our team development, think time for our company development, all those things that start coming up, come up again, maybe in different ways, come up again with some new ideas, come up again with a different spark. And as they're coming up, just like what you were talking about, they change. And sometimes, now what do we have to do? We have to prioritize. We have to prioritize what we want to change. We have to prioritize what we're focusing on. We have to prioritize what we're creating. And then based off of that, we can go, okay, cool. I noticed all this stuff. I've decided, or we've decided, these are the things that are really important. And now everything else, it can either fit in or wait.
I would add something, if that's okay.
Please add.
I would add thinking about, and when you're in that place where you have those distracting thoughts, where they kind of start coming in, asking yourself, what's the purpose of these? Are these just being thrown at me as distractions? Or am I throwing them at myself as distractions? What do I need to detach from? What's useful for me to attach to? What's useful for me to give my attention to? What's not? And being proud of yourself that you lasted 3 minutes.
Right? I think that's important. And really, I like your additional questions. I don't know, depending on the day, I don't know if I would want to even contemplate the answers. However, there are days that I'm like, yes, let's take this further. Yes, because the questions that you just asked actually help do the prioritizing. I don't know if you saw that. They actually help. Where do I want to work on this? And do I even care?
Well, and a lot of that stuff is just the Buddhists call it monkey mind. It's just nonsense that you don't need to attach to. It's just little flirts I believe that there are these little flirts out there of little ideas that gets kind of thrown at you. You can attach to them, or you can thank them for sharing and send them on their way. I kind of think about it as a thought river that kind of flows in front of us, and we can pull something out of the river, or we can just let it float on by. The more you let float by that is determine is not of use, the more laser focused you can be on the things that are really relevant to you. First, you have to decide what's important. What is important to you? What matters to you? Not what do your parents think matter? What do what your spouse thinks matter? What are the things that matter to you? Find those and get real bloody attached to those for now. They can change over time, but for now, find something. And then only entertain those thoughts that get you to in greater place where you're thinking more about that and not about the silliness. There's so much nonsense that we're bombarded with. And I sound like an old lady when I say that, but a lot of this stuff is nonsense. And I won't play there. I play everywhere else, but I won't play where it's useless. It's a waste of my time, in my opinion, and it serves no real purpose for me. And I've gotten there because I've chosen what's important to me. And what's
Isn't that interesting? I wouldn't have said it that way. I have the same thing. And my values haven't changed. However, how I define my values and how they show up on my life changes. And I would say the same is true for Red Directions. The company values that we have set is that they become deeper, they become stronger when we practice them. And as a team, right, at Red Direction, we get roots and we're able to grow really deep with each other. And the concepts that are coming out of what's being delivered to customers, what we're achieving to give out to different companies to use. And really, it only comes from the fact that we talk about it. We're willing to embrace ideas. Now, I do like ideas with a beginning and a middle and an end. I am good enough at throwing spaghetti at the wall. I don't need anybody else to help with that. And in fact, we've got some parameters in place to help me, which actually helps everybody. And my thing is, let's just throw it all up on the wall and try it. Well, then we get spread too thin. And then we're all frustrated because we're missing deadlines. And then we're this, and then we're that, and blah, 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 right? There's all this stuff that comes up that is a result of that. And so by getting really laser focused, that laser focus is something where, okay, so let's think about this idea a little more. What does it look like now? What are the reasons for it? And what are the outcomes that help us get to this place that we have decided that we're going? And that can happen in any setting. And the thing is, it goes back to that space. And I call it space. Some people call it time. They want it in their calendar. And protect it at all costs. Because if we don't practice it, it stays a lot, all of this stuff all the time that we can't really detach what we want to think about, what we need to think about, what makes sense to think about at a particular time or a particular place, because we're never getting to the space where all that can go away. And it took me like 3 months doing this once a week for several hours to be able to get past some of that, because I would sit down for my think time, which I do for 4 hours once a week. And all that would come up was all of the stuff that still needed to be done. Well, that was because we had thrown too much spaghetti against the wall, and we were trying to see how much of it could stick, not just picking one and throwing it against the wall and seeing if the one could stick.
So you hadn't prioritized. And that's the point of focusing on what is important right now. It can change. You can change your mind about what is worth focusing on for me now, and what is going to take me toward where I want to go, and what is going to take me away. It's also talking, our life goes in the direction of the conversations we have. So I believe that we only have two things that are finite. Well, one thing that's finite, and that's time in this body. So I get to choose where and with whom I spend my time. And those are my choices. And if I am not scrupulously careful about my choices, then there will be a loss of my time. I will have not spent my time wisely for me. And so I won't let people waste my time. And I'm very careful about trying not to waste my time. So the monkey mind stuff is a huge waste of my time. So I have talks with myself, and I literally, my suggestion for you those 4 hours is to do this. Take your finger and point it right at you and say, cut it out. Cut out the nonsense. This is for you. This 4 hours is important for you. Give it to yourself and quit taking it away with all this other wasted crap. Talking to yourself in a loving, yet strict, yet firm way is a really good way of getting those voices to shut up. And if they keep interfering, coaches call them gremlins, those little noisy things that come in. You thank them for sharing and you send them on your way. But the more you manage your thoughts, the more you subject your thoughts to scrutiny, the more you properly utilize your time, the happier you're going to be. And I didn't say that. I didn't mean that from bossy place, just my experience. But you can't, like I'm down in the sculpture studio creating. I can't waste my time. I must be doing something that's taking me toward creation.
And and for me, I need that. I need that action, no problem. I also need the ability to bump around the walls and find out what my walls are, because I don't know. I don't know until I figure it out, until I'm willing to go, yeah, okay, maybe today I'm going to crawl instead of run. If I can do this crawling well today, I'll be doing pretty darn good.
But what I was going to say is part of my creative process is to piddle. But it has to be intentional piddling around. Do you understand?
I do. Well, I do. And in fact, there's, one of my conditioning things is, and I'm incredibly envious that you can piddle with purpose. I know 2 other people that can piddle with purpose, and maybe that should be a new hashtag. Regardless, though, for me, I don't know how to piddle with purpose. I know how to do stuff. I know how to take responsibility. I know how to solve problems, and I know how to get it done. I don't know how to just sit around and actually enjoy sitting around, to do some needlework, to bake because I want to, not because I said I'd do something for somebody else's party or idea or something like that. So I want to take a step back and go, I totally get where you're coming from. I'm somewhere on the path of being able to scold myself that way, because I need to unlearn. I really am in this place of unlearning things that are that I have decided or that come across in my conditioning as, of course I'm going to do this way, and actually not do anything at all and be okay with it. So I have to practice the opposite of what I've been doing to really see if what I've been doing works or not, or which parts of it work or not. And to have that literally sit in an uncomfortable place, which I hate. I hate being uncomfortable, but I practice it. I teach it. It's the most important thing.
An interrupting question, a coachy question?
Uh-oh, maybe.
Do you feel you know how to play?
Oh, I play really well.
Okay, so why are you not playing when you are doing your nothing, do the needlework, doing nothing? That's just play.
It's conditioning. It goes back to my perception of the world.
You can unlearn that.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. That's piddling with purpose. You can unlearn, because all I'm doing is playing. The whole time I'm creating, all I'm doing is playing. But I had to give myself permission to play. And so I have little talks with myself. I'm not going to let anything that's stupid and useless interrupt my play.
But isn't that interesting? Because for me, I don't know what's stupid and useless. And I'm actually challenging and saying that's an assumption of mine, that this is stupid and useless, and that I'm actually questioning that. So it's interesting. We're talking about the same thing, but we're coming at it 2 different ways from 2 different places. Okay, so let's reword it. I think it's important to understand that I'm just questioning assumptions. So we're all it is our story, right?
You look at it in retrospect. Was that useful? And you learn.
Well, hold on. How about if we say this to everybody out there? We try and learn. Because how many times maybe you might be an exception to this, but there are a lot of times I'm like, ooh, I learned from that. And then what happens? I do the exact same thing again. And I didn't like it the first time.
It's really helpful to find amusement in how many times we do these things.
Laugh.
Because the thing that I think is most important is to be kind with yourself.
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Life is a very tough thing to do. Being in these bodies, and especially in these times, is pretty challenging. And being kind to yourself and saying, you did it again. You did that very same thing again. I don't judge myself harshly for that. I call myself sweetie, and I go, now, sweetie, you did that again. Now just settle down, do this little finger thing, but settle down and maybe decide not to. And when I speak to myself, even when I give myself a little lecture, I always do it with love, because it's terribly important to remember that we're very, very fragile beings, and we're very, very precious, incredibly magnificent beings. And we must be the first ones on deck to give ourselves compassion and love. And we must be the first people to whom we give compassion and love. People who are out there, all over the world, giving everything away, are not creating a sustainable model for doing that. You're giving yourself compassion and love. You're getting thoughtful and more aware about your thoughts and where you're spending your time and with whom. I have fired a lot of people lately because they don't get to come to my party. And so when you do all of that, then you have a different experience of yourself, and you're powerful, you're lovable, you're worthwhile. And I will tell you that you're ahead of the game of now about 95, 99% of people, because most of us don't believe we're lovable. Most of us don't give ourselves awareness of our thoughts. And most of us don't see ourselves doing better than we did yesterday.
So what makes it bold to embrace creative thinking?
I think, subjecting ourselves to the results of creativity, wherever that inspires us, whatever inspires us. Like some people are inspired by music, I'm art. I'm also inspired by the potential of the human being, the spirit of us. I believe we can do anything. And so subjecting yourself to people who have like-mindedness around this, who inspire you and show you results of their inspiration and talk to you about their struggle of creating. I talk to artists all the time. They can be a miserable lot, a lot of their creative time. I want to throw my pieces against the wall and have 2 or 3 times in the creation of them. And to hear about other people struggling and blowing past those barriers and moving themselves through the things that other people let themselves be stopped by is a very, very bold thing to do, because you're taking in that information, and as you take in that information, you can become willing to follow that course or take a little bit of their wisdom and use it for your own bold journey. It's the willingness to understand that on the day after you die, you're going to be examining how well did you spend this one wild, precious life? Was it well spent? And if you are mindful of the legacy you want to create for yourself and those you love, and if you're mindful of the fact that you're going to die, what do you want to leave behind? How do you want to view this life after it's over? It causes me, at least, to be more mindful of how I'm going to live it.
The biggest takeaway today for me is that we control what we think. Well, and Colleen would say, we don't control what we think. We're a thought in and of itself. Whatever way you approach it, and by the way, both are right. One of the coolest things about the Voice of Bold Business Radio and life as a whole is that we have many different perspectives that we're working from. And it's how we come together, and it's how we show up and create space not only for ourselves, but for those around us, for all of us to be able to think. That's what's going to make or break our connection with others. So in the spirit of connection and in the spirit of thinking, I'd like to invite you to share your stories using hashtag VBBRadio, sending us an email, radio@reddirection.com, even reach out on Twitter @Jess_Dewell, and tell us your experience with creative thinking. More specifically, this concept of thinking and what our thoughts tell us, and do you make space for thoughts? Maybe even how has thinking about your thinking actually helped you or gotten in your way, and what you did about it. The reason this matters is that we're continuously learning. And in this process of continuous learning, you will find some program notes, quotes, and other information at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P171. That is the voiceofboldbusiness.com/P171. You may also search the site for creative thinking. What do you do to foster creative thinking?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.